In the luxurious confines of the presidential suite's bathroom, the woman perched on the rim of the bathtub. It was the very hotel they had visited 2 years prior, and she mused over how meticulously the man must have orchestrated their return to this exact location. The girl was aware of his cunning nature, yet she understood that he genuinely had the power to secure her father's release from prison, a fact that filled her with irritation. The man was known for his relentless determination to achieve his desires. He resorted to blackmail, coercing her into spending time with him. This raised the question of whether he still deserved the title of prosecutor. Unexpectedly, the bathroom door swung open as the man boldly announced his arrival, stating he was there to ensure that everything was fine with her. Upon noticing the girl merely sitting, he inquired whether she had come to the sauna and urged her to make haste. In response, Tae, with irritation, questioned whether he was unaware of the etiquette of knocking before entering. The young woman, her eyes narrowed with annoyance, wondered aloud what could possibly occur to her within the confines of the bathroom as she cast a scornful look at the man. There had been a time when she had looked forward to their encounters with great anticipation, but now she had no desire to see him. He resembled a fleeting cold, arriving swiftly and vanishing just as abruptly. During those times, whenever she glanced his way, a spark ignited within her. During that moment, she found those emotions to be novel and captivating. However, the present reality made it intolerable for her to gaze in his direction. Park spun on his heel and urged her to pick up the pace. The girl reflected inwardly, uncertain about what had initially drawn her to him all those years ago. In an effort to regain her composure, she reminded herself that it was merely a transaction, and her initial venture into something like this didn't have to be particularly significant. The door emitted a soft creak as it opened. A man reclined comfortably in his chair, taking slow, deliberate sips of his whiskey. His eyes turned towards the girl, examining her with a keen and critical gaze. Shifted nervously from one foot to the other, uncertain as she wondered aloud about his expectations of her. Observing her closely, the man noticed her nervousness as she fidgeted, clutching the hem of her shirt. A smirk played on his lips as he pointed out that her earlier bravado now appeared to be mere hollow words. The girl pressed her lip between her teeth and gazed at him, her eyes reflecting a blend of apprehension and annoyance. Wore a look of disinterest as he toyed with the rocks, indicating that he was anticipating her attempt to entertain him. The girl, struggling to maintain her composure, bit her lip once more. She expressed that things would be simpler for her if he communicated his preferences. The man's eyes sparkled with interest as he adjusted himself to sit more comfortably. He let out a sigh and suggested that, under these circumstances, she ought to demonstrate the true meaning of the highly praised customer service she had been talking about so enthusiastically. With an attempt to exude confidence, the girl made her way toward him. Her options were limited, leaving her with no other route. Determined, she resolved to simply go through with it. As she moved closer, she lowered herself to her knees beside him. The man sat there unmoving, as if frozen in place. He gazed at her with self-assuredness, savoring the understanding that she was now within his grasp. During that night, he at last succeeded in transforming the visions and longings that had plagued his thoughts for the previous 2 years into reality. As the sun rose, its rays streamed into the room, casting a warm glow. The man stirred awake to the persistent beeping of his phone's alarm. Slowly, he sat up in bed, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Tae was nowhere to be seen. He extended his hand toward the pack of cigarettes, drawing in a long, deep breath as he scanned the room. His eyes eventually landed on a note resting on the bedside table. The girl had penned a message stating that she had met his demands and now placed her father's future in his care, earnestly seeking his assistance. Park released a cloud of smoke into the air, a smirk playing on his lips as he mused about how the girl's lack of manners had caught him by surprise. To her, he was far from finished with their encounter. A few days passed, and the prosecutor's colleagues gathered in the office, murmuring softly among themselves about his odd appearance and peculiar behavior. The man sat at his desk, deep in thought, as he observed the list of unanswered calls from the girl. Reaching his breaking point, he struck the desk with his hands, then made his way to the door, offering his colleagues a polite farewell as he went. Realized it was time to end his silent retreat. He understood exactly what steps were necessary to capture the girl's attention, and felt resolute in his decision to implement his plan. During that time, remained at home, confined to her bed because she was unwell. For nearly a week, the young girl battled to regain her strength. Her entire body throbbed with pain, and the fever showed no signs of breaking. She deliberately ignored the prosecutor's attempts to contact her, fully aware that he would dismiss her claims of illness following their encounter. The only individual she spoke to was Lee Jun. She informed him about her illness and mentioned her plan to resume work in a few days. The girl chose to view the recent events as nothing more than a bad dream, believing that after some rest, things would improve. 4 days had passed and she found herself back at her workplace. Suddenly a voice reached her ears, a voice she recognized, one that was both familiar and pleasing. Lee wrapped his arms around the girl, noticing with worry that she seemed much thinner than before. He inquired whether she had been skipping meals over the last few days. Sensed the warmth and care emanating from him, which enveloped her in a sense of comfort and tranquility. In an attempt to ease his worries, she offered him a gentle smile and conveyed that she was feeling all right now. The man kept his grip firm on her shoulders, expressing his deep concern for her well-being. He mentioned that during their phone conversation, her voice had carried an alarming tone, making it seem as though she were close to a dire state. The girl was profoundly moved by the realization that someone genuinely cared for her well-being. Her cheeks flushed with color as she expressed regret for causing him any concern. Without warning, a shiver coursed through her body, leaving her rooted to the spot. Even as the man continued his conversation, her eyes remained fixed on the front door, unable to look away. Lee Jun mentioned that her employer had made efforts to discover the identity of the man who had escorted her away on that particular day. Her boss initially suspected that an outsider had malicious intentions towards her. However, upon learning the truth, he felt reassured, realizing his concerns had been unfounded. Behind him, Park emerged. Her friend had noted that his cousin had arrived earlier that morning, seeking her presence. The man inclined his body towards the girl, prompting her to quickly retreat, reminiscent of prey instinctively avoiding a predator. He offered a greeting and inquired about the severity of her recent illness. About 6 hours earlier, the prosecutor found himself at his desk, gazing intently at his phone with a pensive expression. His mother and older brother were quietly discussing the unusual events occurring around him. Without warning, the man proclaimed his intention to soon introduce a new resident to their household. His relatives looked at him with surprise etched on their faces. Their curiosity piqued as they wondered aloud about the person he was referring to, speculating if it might be someone from his list of clients. Park had simply replied that he would bring her that day, and requested that they ensure a room was ready for her arrival. His mother looked at him with wide-eyed surprise, her mind swirling with questions about the situation. However, he was already making his way to the door, feeling it unnecessary to provide any further explanation. 6 hours later, he found himself seated at work beside, expressing his sincere regret over her illness. Despite her condition, he insisted it was important for her to respond to his calls, as her lack of communication had compelled him to travel this great distance to visit her. The girl let out a small snort and mentioned that, regrettably, she had been so unwell that she wasn't able to answer any calls. The man narrowed his eyes, directing a focused gaze at her. Despite this, she maintained her playful demeanor, persisting in her defiant stance against him. He smirked, suggesting with a knowing glance that her illness appeared to vary depending on the caller, subtly indicating his awareness that she had been conversing with Lee Jun. Fixed a stern gaze upon her, questioning her certainty about assisting her father. He reminded her that contesting the judgment in a case involving a powerful corporation was a formidable endeavor. The girl realized that he held power over her, prompting her to express regret and assure him that she would not disregard him again moving forward. The man ignited the lighter, expressing to her that if she grasped the gravity of her predicament, she would realize that her days of working at the casino were over starting from that moment. Tay gazed at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, overwhelmed by a feeling of helplessness. He explained that he was merely fulfilling his duties, yet suggested that if she believed her tasks were complete, she was gravely incorrect. Relaxing into his chair, he suggested she approach her boss with the intention of resigning. He implied that if she didn't take this step, he would shut down the establishment, effectively leaving her with no alternative. Park Kai observed her intently, deliberately pausing as he inquired whether she might come to regret her choice, especially given that this decision would also leave her friend Lee unemployed. Their bond appeared to be quite strong. Gazed at him with desperation in her eyes, acknowledging his victory in their confrontation. Yet he persisted, advising her that she must also address the issues awaiting her at home. He fixed her with an intense stare, stubbed out his cigarette, and instructed her to wrap up her affairs, mentioning that he would be waiting for her in the car in 15 minutes. Shook with fury, struggling to comprehend why he was pressuring her to leave her job and questioning the state of her home. Observing the man as he exited the establishment, the girl concluded that her first priority was to leave the place immediately. The young woman slipped out of the building through the rear exit, her mind racing with thoughts of where she might find refuge. Her feet moved swiftly, taking her farther and farther from her workplace. In her heart, she knew she had to seek a spot where he would never think to look for her. Struggling to hold back her tears, questioned whether there existed a place where Park couldn't track her down. Without warning, she halted in her tracks as a voice pierced the air, calling her name. Her gaze lifted in response. The sense of relief washed over her. As she realized it was Lee Jun, he inquired about how her discussion with her cousin had turned out. The girl felt an immense sense of relief upon realizing it was Lee Jun, who was known for his kindness and warmth. She took this as a divine sign. The man escorted the girl to his house. Upon arrival, his mother revealed herself to be a warm and hospitable woman. Touched by the girl's circumstances, she expressed her willingness to provide shelter for as long as the girl required. Lee meticulously crafted a delightful dinner, and everyone gathered around the table to enjoy the meal together. Experienced a sense of warmth and care that she hadn't felt in quite some time. Grateful for their kindness, she expressed her thanks and started her meal. The man offered her a warm smile, inquiring if she found it to her liking. His presence exuded a comforting glow and a sense of warmth. The girl offered a sincere smile, acknowledging his impressive cooking skills. It was the first time in a long while that she experienced a sense of tranquility and happiness. Unexpectedly, the girl's phone began to ring. Seeing that it was her mother calling at such a late hour took her by surprise. Tae felt her life shatter once more in a heartbeat. Her mother had shared the news that the prosecutor had visited them, offering a promise to aid in her father's release from prison. Filled with a renewed sense of hope, the woman found it hard to believe their luck, as the girl's heart raced with anticipation. In a state of panic, the girl dashed towards the police station, her voice raised in distress as she urgently sought the whereabouts of her mother. As she stepped into the prosecutor's office, his voice reached her ears. He commented with a smirk that it had been some time since her last visit. The young man stood with his arms folded across his chest, leaning casually against the desk, a smug grin playing on his lips. Approached him with urgency, her voice raised as she demanded to know what he had said to her mother, and what actions he had taken against her. With anger in her tone, she questioned if he considered her entire family nothing more than a mere amusement. The man let out a measured breath, and remarked with a composed demeanor that she ought to have heeded his advice when he was treating her kindly. He leaned forward, his voice a low growl, questioning her audacity in attempting to escape from him. Upon noticing the girl's defiant gaze fixed on him, he quietly informed her that her current actions would now decide the fate of not just her father, but her mother too. Tae stood motionless, struggling to comprehend how this madman could be so ruthless. Some time later, the girl's mother made her way into the prosecutor's office. Upon spotting her daughter, she inquired about the time of her arrival. Curiosity piqued, the woman also questioned her daughter's whereabouts during the period they had been apart. The girl felt a surge of happiness when she learned that the prosecutor had reached out to her. Her mother, startled by this revelation, discovered that the prosecutor was actually the older brother of her daughter's classmate. She couldn't help but wonder why he had never shared this significant piece of information. The girl cast a glance at her mother, her mind swirling with the unspoken desire to reveal the true nature of the man before them. Yet, she found herself unable to voice her thoughts. Park wore an unsettlingly amiable smile, as he noted that it had been quite a while since they last conversed. He then gestured invitingly for the woman to take a seat. The man expressed his keen interest in father's case, revealing his complete involvement in the matter. He conveyed his confidence that they were prepared to submit a petition for a case review. The woman struggled to suppress her tears and expressed her gratitude to him. She affirmed her belief that her husband was incapable of committing the acts he was accused of. She inquired if all charges would be dismissed once the case underwent review. The man, with a gentle smile and a warm demeanor, assuredly promised that he would ensure it happened as desired. The girl's mother rose from the couch, offering a grateful bow to him, expressing that he was indeed a remarkable gift to their family. The man, with a smug grin, observed angry reaction as she clenched her fists and shot him icy looks. Her eyes met his ominous stare, which silently conveyed the message that she ought to observe and express gratitude just like her mother did. Observing the woman's increasing agitation as anger coursed through her, the man responded with a smile. He advised her to remain composed, insisting that he sought no thanks and was merely fulfilling his responsibilities. The man unexpectedly broke into a smirk and suggested that, during the investigation, it would be wiser for them to relocate. He assured them that their safety was already arranged and had secured accommodation for each of them. The woman brushed away her tears, astonished by his words. She was puzzled as to why there was a need for her and her daughter to live apart. Park's eyes sparkled as he spoke in a sweet, honeyed voice, acknowledging Mrs. Hectic's schedule. He mentioned that he had heard about Tice's illness that had lasted a few days, leaving her without anyone to care for her, which had understandably worried him. He was taken aback to discover that the mother had no idea her daughter had been employed at an unlawful gambling establishment. Shocked, the woman inhaled sharply and brought her hand up to cover her mouth. In the end, the deranged individual managed to persuade the girl's mother in just 7 minutes that it would be more beneficial to remain at his residence. The girl sat in a state of panic, struggling to comprehend the reasons behind his actions. She questioned what he gained from all of it and wondered why he would go to such great lengths just to reach her. As she half listened, the man was putting on a show of being respectable, claiming he would provide her mother with his address. The woman expressed her gratitude and requested that he look after her daughter. A wave of panic engulfed the girl, compelling her to bow her head as she desperately gulped air through her mouth. Just then, her mother mentioned that she needed to use the restroom and would wait for her by the police station's exit. Upon realizing her mistake too late, hurried toward the exit in an attempt to catch up with her mother. She was determined not to be left behind with the man. Park acted swiftly, understanding her intentions before she could execute them. He silenced her with a kiss, gently pressing her against the door as he closed the office behind them. The girl initially reciprocated his kiss, but when his hands started to overstep boundaries, she delivered a sharp slap to his face. She voiced her frustration towards him with a sharp tone. She couldn't understand why he was so adamant about her staying at his place. Did he truly have intentions of taking advantage of her? The man's cheek pulsed with a warm, reddening sensation. For a few silent moments, he observed her without speaking. Without warning, he reached out and clasped her hands in his own. He reminded her of his constant encouragement to strive for excellence, and he confessed that the greatest achievement she had ever accomplished was capturing his heart. The girl stared at him as if he had completely lost his mind. To her, it was clear that if he truly understood love, he wouldn't have behaved the way he did towards her. Yet the man continued to insist on how captivating he found her to be. He softly pressed his lips to her palms, expressing that he had been feeling awful for the last few days. For a brief moment, she considered the possibility that his words were genuine. His eyes suddenly sparkled with a wild gleam. Drawing her close to him, he wore an odd smile as he expressed how incredible he felt in her presence. The girl found herself baffled by the mixture of emotions she held for him. Despite her fear and disdain, the moment his lips touched hers, all those feelings seemed to vanish. Shoved him back once more, her voice rising as she demanded he put an end to it all. The man breathed heavily, his eyes locked onto her with a captivated gaze, feeling as if she were driving him to the brink of madness. She observed him closely, noticing the satisfied grin that spread across his face, clearly pleased that she occasionally yielded to him in moments like these. Without warning, she reached out and seized his tie, drawing him closer until their lips met in a sudden kiss. After a few moments, a sharp pain shot through Park's lip, causing him to pull back and wipe away the blood. With a smirk directed at the girl, he noted her actions as quite intriguing. The girl brushed her lips with the back of her hand and retorted confidently, aware that he would find it appealing. Both individuals stood still, startled by the recognizable voice that reached their ears. just as Mrs. attempted to push open the door, was overwhelmed by the rapid pounding of her heart. The young woman realized she had to keep the incident with the prosecutor a secret from her mother. To prevent any sound from escaping, she pressed her hand against her mouth. Meanwhile, the persistent woman outside kept knocking on the door, insisting that she had overheard voices coming from within. Park edged nearer, suggesting in a hushed tone that it appeared her mother was on the lookout for her, his voice tinged with a trace of sarcasm. The girl clenched the fabric of her sweater between her teeth, determined to conceal her presence. Meanwhile, the man extended his hand toward the door handle, his voice carrying a playful innocence as he suggested whether he ought to open the door to allow her mother inside. As the girl stayed quiet, the woman persisted in requesting access to the cabinet. The man extended his hand towards the lock, murmuring gently that he was indifferent to the situation, though he suspected her mother would be quite startled. A sly grin spread across his face as he remarked that had been defeated. The girl halted his hand without lifting her gaze. She acknowledged her defeat and implored him to refrain from his actions. Revealing the truth, particularly in this manner, was something she could not allow. Prosecutor Park narrowed his eyes a bit as he informed the girl's mother that her daughter had already departed. The woman, taken aback, decided that she would wait at the entrance for her. Shook with embarrassment, but the man showed no sign of being affected. Unexpectedly, the mother expressed her gratitude to the man for all he had done and implored him to watch over them, their family. Overcome with emotion, the girl stifled a sob with her hand, her thoughts filled with disbelief at her mother's innocence in placing her trust in this individual. A woman's voice echoed through the closed door, insisting repeatedly that her husband was a virtuous man, incapable of any wrongdoing. She spoke fondly of his deep affection for his daughter, and expressed her happiness that the prosecutor seemed to hold the girl in high regard as well. In that instant, the man leaned in and pressed his lips against us. Afterward, he calmly explained that he was merely fulfilling his duties. The woman departed, expressing her gratitude one more time. Just then, caught the faint murmur of Park, who remarked that she could no longer conceal herself from him. While riding in a taxi, the young girl received a message from her mother. Her mother mentioned that the prosecutor had found a charming new house for her, and she urged her daughter to show kindness and gratitude towards him. As the car traveled down the road, the girl pondered what lay ahead for her. Upon reaching the grand and stylish residence, the girl lifted her gaze towards its impressive facade. As she stepped inside, her eyes met those of Park, a former classmate, whose expression turned to one of astonishment as he inquired whether she was truly planning to reside in their home from now on. The young man's mother was taken aback and inquired about how her son was acquainted with such an attractive girl. She gazed at with admiration, thinking how beautiful she was, resembling a doll. The man expressed his discontent, recalling how she had nearly taken legal action against him in the past. Meanwhile, his mother stepped forward to reassure the girl, advising her to ignore his grumbling. Taking the girl's hands gently, the woman explained that her son was simply impolite and urged the girl not to take offense. She then inquired if there was anything she could do to assist her. Delicately her hand, expressing that an apology was unnecessary and reassured that all was well. She inquired about the location of her room, eager to drop off her belongings. The woman felt a tinge of embarrassment due to the chilly reception. Park, however, remained unsurprised, reflecting that the girl's arrogance was reminiscent of her university days. Extended her hand toward the suitcase handle, but before she could grasp it, a much larger male hand swiftly claimed it first. Park picked up the girl's suitcase and with a soft tone, assured her that he would guide her to her room. The girl attempted to convey that she was capable of managing her luggage on her own. The man quietly picked up her bag and suitcase without uttering a word and walked toward the room. The relatives gazed at him, bewildered and stunned, as they had never witnessed him behave in such a manner. As moved ahead, he expressed his gratitude for the hospitality he had received. The woman and her son sensed an uneasy tension between the girl and the prosecutor. Their gazes lingered on her, filled with curiosity. Inquired if his mother had observed the peculiar behavior of his brother. She responded, agreeing that she too found his actions unusual. The girl observed the man standing before her with a cautious eye. He guided her into a spacious and well-lit room. After setting down her belongings, he surveyed the area and inquired whether it suited her, expressing his hope that she would find it comfortable. The girl tightened her fists in frustration, perplexed by his actions. She couldn't fathom the reason behind his relentless effort to assist her. Without warning, she realized that maybe his actions were merely an attempt to escape the dullness of his everyday life, serving as a source of amusement. 2 years prior, she had sought amusement in a similar manner. It dawned on her abruptly that his growing interest might stem from the fact that she was not conforming to his expectations. She made up her mind to act obediently, hoping that perhaps this approach would cause him to lose interest in their ongoing game. The man took a quick look at his watch and mentioned that it was time for him to head off to work. Without warning, he spun around and noticed the girl kneeling on the ground. He inquired about her activities. Unexpectedly, the girl responded with a smile, explaining that his mind would operate more efficiently if he experienced a regular release of dopamine. Therefore, she intended to fulfill his request. At that moment, Park appeared to grasp the scheme she intended to involve him in. With a knowing smirk, he responded confidently that he had no objections to participating. He drew nearer to her, his face only inches away, and gently grasped her chin with his hand. With a smirk playing on his lips, he remarked that she was nothing more than a sweetheart. The man wore a smirk as his gaze lingered on her in an oddly prolonged manner. He suddenly, and commented that she likely felt exhausted, encouraging her to take a break and recover her energy. The girl watched in amazement as he walked away, unable to believe how effortlessly he had departed. Without warning, the man spun around to face her, inquiring about her meal preferences. He promised to bring her whatever she desired upon his return from work. Glanced at him with irritation, expressing that she preferred he not be overly kind to her. Lee greeted the girl with a cheerful wave, his smile broad and welcoming. Approaching him with a sense of urgency, she expressed her regret for her tardiness. Her face lit up with joy at the sight of him. The man, with a kind disposition, mentioned that he had brought her some stewed fish, a dish she had greatly enjoyed during her previous visits to his place. Feeling deeply moved by his concern, Tay expressed her gratitude with warmth. The man smiled, understanding that the other gentleman had secured safe lodging for the girl, and acknowledged that it was the very least he could offer her. She grasped his hand, a warm smile spreading across her face, and expressed her heartfelt gratitude for all he had done. Lee felt a wave of emotion wash over him, causing his cheeks to flush with warmth, and he found himself rendered speechless. Seated at a table in a cozy, the man shared with the girl that following her resignation, their boss had grown increasingly arrogant and had begun speaking ill of her. While they engaged in conversation, the girl unexpectedly experienced an unusual sensation, akin to being enveloped by a surge of warmth. The girl, feeling a wave of nervousness, fidgeted with her fingers beneath the table, concealing her hands from view. She noticed her own trembling and realized she had been unusually on edge recently. Lee expressed regret for his lengthy chatter, admitting that he had missed her greatly and inquired about her well-being. The girl attempted to muster a smile, primarily for his benefit, acknowledging the lengths he had gone to see her. Determined to ease the atmosphere, she endeavored to unwind and engage in conversation with her friend as she typically would. After arriving back at the prosecutor's residence, experienced an overwhelming fatigue. Her body radiated with warmth, and her mind seemed enveloped in a dense haze. Upon entering her room, she was greeted by the sound of a familiar male voice. Park acknowledged her return, expressing that she had finally come back. Upon entering the room, the girl was taken aback by the sight of him comfortably seated on the couch, as though he owned the place. The man sat with his arms folded tightly against his chest, casting a peculiar glance in her direction. She inquired whether he had completed his work earlier than he typically did. Prepared herself for another confrontation, anticipating that he would attempt to involve her in yet another of his manipulative schemes. However, she was taken aback when he simply mentioned he would speak with her at a later time. Rising from the couch, he expressed his desire not to disturb her, considering she was unwell. The girl cast a suspicious glance in his direction, puzzled by the sudden shift in his behavior to one of attentiveness and care. As he departed, he advised her to take some time to rest. Abandoned in solitude, the girl rested her head against the pillows, sensing her condition deteriorate. Yet she couldn't shake off the persistent thoughts of Park's schemes. Without warning, it seemed to her as though she was enveloped under a dense sheet of water. Suddenly, she sensed a gentle touch on her forehead and heard a soft voice inquiring about her well-being. Park bent down softly, pressing a gentle kiss on her forehead. The girl was astonished that he would offer her such comfort. The man abruptly observed that the light appeared to be troubling her eyes, and inquired whether she would like him to draw the curtains closed. The girl extended her hand toward him, pleading silently for him to stay by her side. A delicate silk ribbon softly caressed her eyes as the man instructed her to close them. The girl peered through the thin fabric, barely able to discern his silhouette. He inquired gently if she was experiencing any discomfort. She responded, admitting that while it felt a bit unusual, it was manageable. The prosecutor leaned in toward her, offering reassurance that he intended to assist in improving her situation. Tay experienced an odd sensation but found herself reluctant to distance herself from him. In a sudden moment of clarity, she understood that, deep within her heart, she genuinely enjoyed the situation, leaving her astonished by this newfound awareness. Without warning, a sharp gasp escaped her lips as she awoke, her breath coming in heavy bursts. She found herself seated on the couch where she had dozed off earlier that day, a thin sheen of sweat slowly sliding down her face. Her hand brushed across her face as the realization dawned on her that everything had merely been a dream. In the quiet of her room, she reached for her phone and began reading the messages sent by Lee Jun. His words expressed happiness at having met her, and conveyed his concern for her well-being, encouraging her to take more time to rest. A gentle smile spread across her face as gratitude filled her heart, thankful for the presence of such a thoughtful and compassionate person in her life. Park lingered silently in the shadows near the entrance of the girl's room, blending almost seamlessly with the darkness. A maid came up to him, informing him that she had brought the medicines he had requested. The man remained silent, his eyes fixed on his phone screen as it quietly data from his phone. Upon reading her messages exchanged with Lee Jun, he gripped the phone with a fierce intensity, his eyes darkening with a foreboding intensity. In the early hours of the morning, a gentle knock on the door stirred from her slumber. She felt a wave of surprise wash over her as she pondered who might be visiting at such an unusual time. As the door swung open, the girl was greeted by the sight of a cheerful maid. The maid's smile broadened, reflecting her delight at finding the madam already up and about. The maid presented a package filled with warm food to the girl, emphasizing the importance of eating it while it retained its heat. It was a request from the prosecutor, who had instructed her to ensure the girl was well fed. Feeling a wave of embarrassment, Tay accepted the package, unsure of how to handle the unexpected gesture that had drawn attention to them. After finishing her meal, she made her way to the kitchen, reflecting on how much improved she felt after enjoying the soup that the prosecutor had arranged to be sent to her. The girl found herself lost in her own thoughts, so much so that it took a familiar voice to bring her back to the present. The man inquired about her night's rest and her current well-being. In the kitchen, himself with the task of preparing a warm cup of tea. He turned towards her, gesturing for her to take a seat as he promised to pour her tea before it cooled. The man and the woman took their seats at the table. Observing her closely, he suggested she should drink the tea, noting that she appeared to still be running a fever. Tay's senses were piqued as the distinct aroma of the tea wafted through the air, leading her to the unexpected realization that it was the invigorating tea. Observing her bewilderment, the man remarked on her delicate state, advising that she should work on building her physical strength. The girl, filled with anger, posed a rhetorical question, demanding to know who was to blame for her feelings. The woman cast a resentful gaze upon the man, convinced that he was to blame. She still felt unwell, a lingering consequence of the events that transpired at the police station. She recalled how he had ensured she had food and had prepared some healing tea for her. Clutching the cup firmly, she expressed her gratitude to him for the porridge in a soft voice. Park gazed at the girl with a sense of unfamiliarity, as if this was the first time he truly noticed her. Her calm demeanor was unexpected, and he had not anticipated any expression of gratitude from her. Tay lifted the cup to her lips, savoring the warmth of the tea as it trickled down her throat. With genuine gratitude, she acknowledged the delightful taste, expressing her appreciation for the delicious brew. The man stood in awe, captivated by her beauty, which appeared even more radiant to him than it had before. A smile spread across his face as he marveled at how she continued to catch him off guard. Without warning, he inquired about the type of food her father liked best. The girl was taken aback and wondered aloud about his sudden curiosity regarding the topic. In response, he mentioned that in a few days there would be a meeting scheduled in his office. Was taken aback and questioned whether such a meeting was permitted. The man, after taking a sip of his tea, explained that ordinarily it wouldn't be allowed, but he had just decided moments ago to make an exception. His face transformed into its typical arrogant demeanor as he inquired if she comprehended the implications of his statement. The girl suddenly became attentive, trying to understand the implications of his words. He folded his arms across his chest, asserting that he viewed himself as someone who valued fairness. He believed that if she showed him kindness and respect, he would reciprocate with the same. However, if she acted poorly towards him, he promised to respond in a similar manner. The man gazed at her, remarking on her intelligence, confident that she had already grasped the situation. He then assured her of his plan to organize a pleasant lunch for her father and inquired whether she wished to give him a call to chat for a bit. The girl felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. She couldn't help but wonder if he truly intended to follow through with his promise for her sake. The girl felt a surge of anxiety, struggling to accept the situation as reality. Doubt filled her mind as she questioned whether he truly intended to go through with this on her behalf. The girl grew cautious, suspecting that he could be deceiving her. He rose from the table, announcing it was time to prepare for work, and made his way to his room. Was skeptical about the sincerity of his statement, yet she recognized that it seemed like an agreement with a sinister force, and accepting it was her sole option. As she stepped into the room following his lead, the man inquired about the events that had transpired. The prosecutor, showing no signs of being disturbed, inquired about the reasons behind her decision to trail him. A gentle voice emerged from behind him, as the girl expressed her desire to contact her father. She mentioned that it had been ages since she last heard his voice, expressing how much she missed him. The man wore a sly grin as he inquired whether a simple phone call would suffice for her. Hope blossomed within the girl as she expressed her desire just to hear her father's voice, needing reassurance of his well-being. In that instant, the man pivoted to meet her gaze and expressed his expectation of a favor in exchange. Tae had anticipated a situation like this and was prepared to negotiate with him. As the man was adjusting his tie, he inquired whether the girl had any interest in seeing her father in the interrogation room. Tae gazed at him with astonishment, wondering aloud if he truly intended to let her reunite with her father. As he departed, he mentioned that he was merely reciprocating the same amount of effort that she was showing him. And Park found themselves seated in a bustling burger restaurant. Park was visibly upset, his voice rising as he demanded to know how she had managed to find her way into his home. He felt a wave of frustration as he considered his brother's nature, realizing that his sibling wasn't the type to offer assistance without expecting something in return. The girl let out a breath, realizing she had been deceived into arriving at this place. She had been under the impression that his mother had extended an invitation for lunch. The man disregarded her stature and kept yelling that she had nearly taken legal action against him. He questioned why his brother would choose to assist her at this point. The girl cast her weary eyes downward, reflecting on how her older brother had been pestering her since the morning. Now, it was the younger brother's turn. She couldn't help but think what a dreadful family she had. Park reached the limit of his patience. With a decisive gesture, he pointed his finger at her, declaring with certainty that a relationship between her and his brother was completely out of the question. Listened quietly as he expressed his emotions, her eyes remaining downcast until she eventually looked up. With a smirk, she questioned whether he had truly brought her to this place solely to inquire about such matters. The young man felt his cheeks grow warm as he explained that there was more to it than just that. Despite how much he mulled over the situation, everything appeared far too peculiar. He thought it would be preferable if the truth were different, as she would struggle to cope with someone like his brother. The girl studied him intently, surprised by the unexpected honesty in his words. She leaned in closer to him, inquiring whether he held the same disdain for his brother, viewing him as worthless. Park folded his arms across his chest, suggesting that the previous statement was an understatement. He expressed that, in comparison to his brother, the villains in movies paled in significance. Tae rested her cheek on her hand and let a smirk play on her lips as she remarked on the intrigue of the situation, especially since he had only just attempted to gain his brother's approval. The young man turned a shade of pink, feeling uneasy as the girl's unsettling grin was directed his way. She began to explain to him that, in contrast to his parents' situation, her father had begun with nothing and had toiled tirelessly. Ultimately, he succeeded in constructing a magnificent stronghold. In a sudden, catastrophic moment, it all fell apart. She inquired about his thoughts on the fate of her family. The girl smirked, exuding confidence, as she expressed that there was now nothing they couldn't withstand. The young man observed her quietly, while she confidently declared that handling his brother was well within her abilities. He began tapping nervously on the table, expressing his fear of both individuals. Just then, his phone started to ring unexpectedly. The girl showed little interest as she heard him attempting to convey to the person on the phone, Prosecutor Park, that they were on the verge of having a meal, and assured it would not be a lengthy affair. Feeling a surge of fear that drained the color from her face, she let out a yawn, quickly rose from the table, and indicated that they were heading home. As they made their way back home, the young individuals noticed Park seated on the couch, clutching his phone with a firm grip. Upon turning around, the man fixed his brother with a stern gaze and inquired about their opinion on the burgers. The brother, aware of the man's volatile temper, stood frozen in fear. The man responded by expressing his enjoyment of the burgers, commenting on their deliciousness. As another individual came closer, they inquired about her opinion on the burgers. To this, he mentioned that she had scarcely taken a single bite. Chi tilted his head with a smirk, observing that she appeared to have recovered remarkably well, despite having been near death just a short time earlier. The girl remained silent, her gaze fixed on him with a mix of suspicion while he spoke with an unsettling calmness. The prosecutor removed his watch and tossed it onto the couch. He turned to his brother, seeking confirmation of whether he understood the reason behind his insistence that reside with them. The young man understood the impending situation and began to beg his brother to remain calm. At that moment, their mother descended from the second floor. Upon witnessing the older brother lift his hand threateningly toward the younger sibling, the woman let out a scream of horror. A resounding clash reverberated throughout the room, causing his head to snap sharply to the side. In a menacing tone, the man warned that taking the girl out into the dangerous streets was not his right, leaving stunned and motionless. The children's mother hurried towards the man, her voice filled with desperation as she pleaded with him to cease his actions. Hearing the girl's voice caused him to stop abruptly. With a firm tone, she commanded him to cease, positioning herself protectively in front of Park. Noticing that he had halted and was gazing intently at her, she serenely requested him to cease once more. Feeling a deep sense of horror, she averted her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that everything had escalated beyond her control. As the man prepared to leave, he turned back and requested the girl to provide his mother with some pills to help soothe her nerves. During that instant, his eyes landed on a recognizable bag placed upon the ottoman. The bag contained the porridge the man had previously purchased just for her. This indicated that he had returned home from work earlier this time and had brought her food once more. Park was taken aback as the sound of a knock echoed from his room door. In the quiet hours of the early morning, the girl stepped into the room, curiosity lacing her question about his sleeplessness at such an ungodly hour. The man, with a scrutinizing gaze, responded by reminding her that he had not given her permission to enter. Disregarding his comment, the girl took a seat and explained that she had been the one to request Park to accompany her for a meal. She felt obligated to repay him since she couldn't simply consume the food he provided without compensating him. The man's temple pulsed visibly as he inquired whether the victim had truly extended a dinner invitation to the perpetrator. Acknowledged that their relationship was indeed complex. However, the promise of a meal was enough for her to endure even greater challenges. The man extinguished his cigarette with a smirk playing on his lips. He leaned closer, his gaze fixed on her, and referred to her as baby, explaining that this was precisely the reason she continued to bring trouble upon herself. He offered a sorrowful smile, noting how her actions frequently led her into difficult situations. Frowned, feeling grateful for his concern, yet she expressed that it wasn't necessary. She mentioned that her issues were not as numerous as he assumed. After wishing him a good night, she announced her intention to head to her room. Without warning, the man seized her wrist and, locking his gaze with hers, implored her to remain because he had something important to convey. The girl felt a hint of fear as she realized she had nothing else to discuss with him and began to get ready to depart. Unexpectedly, she caught the sound of his voice. In a hushed tone, the man revealed that 3 years prior, Park had been involved in a hit-and-run accident. The alcohol concentration in the man's bloodstream measured an alarming 0.378%, a figure so high that even the most experienced officers were taken aback by its extremity. Meanwhile, the young victim, who had only recently celebrated her 20th birthday, remained reliant on life-sustaining machines. The man inquired whether she continued to harbor any sympathy for his sibling. The girl spun around, her expression filled with horror as her eyes locked onto him. Words failed her, leaving her in stunned silence. Upon discovering that the scoundrel had taken her away and seated himself beside her, Park was incensed. It dawned on him that his brother still hadn't grasped the consequences of his actions. He kept a firm grip on her hand, and in an unexpected move, drew her closer to himself. Caught off guard, the girl stumbled and toppled directly onto him. As their eyes met, he inquired whether she had sought him out solely to express her regret over his brother. Was displeased with the situation and responded curtly, insisting that she had never expressed any pity for him. The man kept his gaze fixed on her, suggesting that she might believe she was remarkable for the sacrifices she made for her father. However, in his opinion, she was merely a naive girl with little else to give. The girl found herself amazed at how effortlessly she could forgive someone capable of such a grave act. She realized that all she needed was a bit more time. Her gaze remained fixed on him, filled with tension. Park gazed at her with a newfound admiration, realizing that this was exactly what made her irresistibly appealing to him. In a warm embrace, he gently requested that she smile, cautioning that his mood depended on it. Without warning, the girl's attention was drawn to a bottle of whiskey and a glass resting on the nearby small table. With a subtle motion, she extended her hand and caused the object to tumble to the floor. The shattering of glass reverberated throughout the room. The girl stepped back from the man, quickly expressing her regret for accidentally causing the object to fall. Gently, she traced his cheekbone with her finger, observing that his unusually talkative nature that day had led her to make such an error. Rising abruptly from her seat, she made her way toward the door with determination. Just as she reached the threshold, she halted unexpectedly and turned to him. In a voice both curious and pointed, she inquired whether he had ever pondered the notion that a man like himself, reliant on her for something he deemed trivial, might actually be the one who was more misguided and hollow. The man remained silent, offering only a smirk in response. As departed, confidence surged within her, resolute in her belief that she could undoubtedly manage him. She was convinced of her own strength surpassing his. Park reclined against the sofa, her mind filled with thoughts of her own cleverness and daring nature. It was precisely these qualities that made it impossible for him to allow her to depart. In his mind's eye, he envisioned her face, contemplating how every encounter with her stirred a whirlwind of emotions within him, and how he yearned for her constant presence beside him for all time. In his mind, he envisioned her gently placing her hand on his cheek. Yet, his thoughts were consumed by the guilt of having deceived her about his brother, a lie crafted solely to create distance between them. He envisioned a world where he obliterated everything in her surroundings, leaving himself as the sole presence in her existence. At his workplace, Park sat in deep contemplation, barely registering the repeated attempts of his colleague to convey something important regarding the ongoing case. The man, lost in his thoughts and often distracted, had penned an invitation to, asking her to join him for dinner. He noticed she had seen the message, yet no response came from her. Rising from the table with resolve, he made up his mind to head home sooner than usual. A smirk played on his lips as he reflected on the girl's persistent tendency to overlook his messages. As the man stood at the sink, washing his hands, one of his colleagues unexpectedly walked into the restroom and greeted him with a cheerful demeanor. The man started to express his thoughts with a cheerful tone, conveying that his admiration had grown. He noted that Prosecutor Park had truly proven himself as an exceptional talent by executing such a clever scheme and managing to evade any consequences. He leaned in closer, confiding that the prisoner's family remained completely unaware that all the misfortunes they had endured were the result of his devious schemes. With a hearty laugh, he patted his shoulder, expressing that the very thought was beyond this family's imagination, as a prosecutor could never stoop to being a criminal. Trying to stifle his amusement, the man pleaded for at least the honor of their fellow prosecutors to be preserved. Park cast an irritable glance at his bothersome colleague. The man's eyes gradually moved towards the person who couldn't stop talking. The man, hopeful for the success of his next scheme, was on the verge of departing when the prosecutor's hand extended towards him, stopping him in his tracks. In a swift motion, he seized the man's collar and yanked him closer. The man erupted in protest, demanding to know his intentions and boasting about his father-in-law's ties to the chief prosecutor. He warned that if he wished to avoid a demotion, releasing him would be a wise decision. Within moments, his head disappeared beneath the surface of the water. The prosecutor showed no sign of being disturbed as he probed further, wondering aloud if the man's arrogant demeanor stemmed from his belief that his father-in-law's connections with influential figures granted him authority. Raising the head of his chatty coworker, he inquired whether the colleague was familiar with someone by the name of Gong Min. The man was well aware of the infamous loan shark and enforcer, Gong Min, who boasted the largest stash of money in the nation. As he pondered a possible link between Prosecutor Park and this notorious figure, a memory surfaced. It appeared that Prosecutor Park's mother's maiden name was Gong. Park Kai observed the moment of understanding flash across the other person's eyes and confirmed that he had grasped the truth. The man in question was indeed his grandfather. The ledger his grandfather maintained was so intricate that Kai occasionally assisted with it. With a sly grin, he inquired whether the thought had ever crossed his mind that the ledger might list both the chief prosecutor and his father-in-law. In response, the man mentioned that he had even spotted the president's name within its pages. After finally letting go of the man, he warned him that he would be released this time. However, he advised the man to refrain from interfering in matters that did not concern him and to focus on doing his job properly. The individual cast a fearful glance towards the prosecutor, repeatedly expressing regret and insisting that his actions had never been intended to escalate to such a point. He had merely wished to engage in a conversation with a coworker. Park made his way back to the mirror, where he calmly set about refining his appearance. Was seated on the couch beside the prosecutor's mother, gently encouraging her to eat, cautioning that without nourishment, she risked fainting. The woman was only concerned about whether his facial bruises had healed. The girl responded confidently, expressing her belief that he was all right, despite not having seen him for several days. The woman rose from her seat, announcing her intention to rest. Tae gently urged her to have something to eat before retiring for the night. In the quiet room, a young girl found herself lost in thought, questioning her presence in this unfamiliar house. The separation of her family weighed heavily on her mind, a situation she deeply disliked. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. She had forgotten to respond to the prosecutor's message. Anxiety crept in as she contemplated the level of his potential frustration with her oversight. Out of nowhere, she was taken by surprise as a voice she recognized broke the silence. Park stood just behind her, clutching a bag of porridge, and inquired with concern whether her phone was malfunctioning. The girl turned her gaze toward him, and with a sense of calm, informed him that her phone was in good condition. The man inquired whether, under those circumstances, she had overlooked his message. In response, the girl assured him that she had indeed read it. After a brief pause, she rose to her feet and mentioned her intention to go upstairs for some rest. The man passed the food to her, expressing his certainty that she hadn't eaten dinner yet and encouraging her to have some. Spun around, expressing her lack of appetite. She suggested he concentrate on ensuring his mother ate, as she had not been eating recently and had been spending her time simply lying down. Park kept his gaze fixed on her, stating that she had 30 minutes to change and come downstairs because they were planning to have dinner together. The girl remained facing away, expressing her exhaustion and her decision not to engage in the task. The man suddenly spun her around to face him, remarking with a critical tone that she still exhibited dreadful manners. He questioned whether she genuinely believed that acting in such a manner would give the impression that she was playing hard to get. He moved closer to her, lowering his voice to a whisper as he mentioned that he wasn't feeling up to it that day. His words carried the firmness of a statement rather than a request, making it clear he had no intention of repeating himself. The girl stood still, paralyzed by fear, as she realized he was once more reaching his objectives by using intimidation. Stood beside the mirror in the room, contemplating the extent of his error if he believed she would simply comply with his demands. She possessed her own methods to provoke his ire. The prosecutor stood beside the car, exhaling smoke into the air, when the familiar tones of his brother and his friends reached his ears. The group of young men had been engaged in a lively conversation when their attention was abruptly drawn to a new presence among them. Observing the man's arrival, their chatter ceased instantly. Park, noticing the man's attire, felt a wave of apprehension and inquired if his brother had plans to leave. He presented his brother to the group of friends. The brother observed them quietly, releasing a cloud of smoke from his lips. Unexpectedly, the young man's focus shifted as a breathtaking beauty emerged from their friend's house. Instantly captivated, they turned their heads and started inquiring about her identity. Emerged wearing a sleek black dress that featured a plunging neckline and a slit reaching her thigh. Her hair cascaded freely around her, enhancing her breathtaking appearance. Felt his muscles tighten as he sternly questioned her choice of attire. The girl displayed a sly smirk as she inquired about what was troubling him. Feigning innocence, she responded that she had merely fulfilled his request. After some time had passed, they found themselves sitting quietly in the car, and the girl reflected on the oddness of his actions. She had anticipated that he might continue to tease her and provoke a quarrel, yet he merely transported her to a different location without uttering a word. In that moment, she was left feeling as though her behavior had been both naive and immature. The man observed discreetly from the side, noticing her anxious habit of biting her lip while her fingers played with the edge of her dress. After a period of time, his eyes abruptly fluttered open. She became aware that she had dozed off during the journey and now found herself confused about her location and the circumstances that led to her unexpected slumber. The girl came to the realization that she was seated inside the vehicle. Beside her sat the prosecutor, his gaze fixed intently on the road ahead. Positioned between them rested a bucket brimming with popcorn. The young woman observed that the man's jacket was laid across her lap, providing her with warmth. Startled, she hesitated before inquiring about their presence in that place. Park cast an odd glance her way, curious about her thoughts on why people chose to attend movies. The man adjusted his seat to a more comfortable position and leaned back, his eyes remaining fixed on the movie playing on the screen before him. The girl glanced at him with a feeling of irritation, frustrated by the ease with which he conducted himself. He behaved as though they were genuinely on a date or an occasion akin to it, yet she remained skeptical of his intentions. He consistently seemed to derive enjoyment from manipulating those around him. Resolved to take matters into her own hands. With a smile, she inquired whether he anticipated any gestures of gratitude from her for arranging the forthcoming meeting with her father. She further remarked that if this was indeed his expectation, she preferred to conclude all dealings promptly. The prosecutor's posture stiffened as he sat up straight, feeling a surge of frustration towards her. His efforts to enjoy the moment had been genuine, yet her behavior agitated him. With a firm tone, he questioned whether her actions were genuinely motivated by gratitude. The girl allowed a sly smile to form on her lips, and confidently confirmed that it was indeed the case. Without warning, the man spun her around to meet his gaze, expressing his frustration over the effort he had exerted to bring her to this place. Despite this, she persisted in her troublesome behavior, constantly testing his patience. He distanced himself from her, expressing his curiosity about the extent of her potential. The girl fixed her eyes on him with a look full of animosity. Her knack for unsettling him was undeniable, consistently managing to disturb his composure, yet his response remained a mystery to her. Swiftly considered the situation. She understood that he was expecting her to become frightened or, even worse, to reveal her fear to him. However, she had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. The man observed her features closely, picking up on the momentary pause in her expression. Unexpectedly, he opened the car door and exited, leaving her bewildered as she watched him, puzzled and curious about his destination. He remained seated in the back, his eyes fixed on her with a piercing gaze, and instructed her to join him there. A short while later, glanced at the girl and confessed that his previous words hadn't been honest. He revealed that he never thought of her as naive or simple-minded. If he had, he would have chosen to offer her a bribe rather than assist in liberating her father. He softly brushed his fingers across her cheek, reminding her once more that she deserved to be valued. The girl inhaled sharply, her breath caught by the weight of his words. His words caused her confidence to falter. As he pressed a gentle kiss upon her lips, the girl came to the realization that her heart had been naive, for it responded to him with undeniable foolishness. The following day, the girl accompanied the prosecutor's mother on a shopping trip. The older woman was in high spirits, talking endlessly about her happiness, especially since she had been blessed with 2 sons. The woman expressed her frustration to the girl, explaining that her sons utterly despised shopping, which often left her to browse the stores alone. In a moment of candor, she admitted that, during her younger years, she hadn't been particularly sharp. This made her all the more grateful that Kai had matured into a well-educated individual. Being in the company of someone so intelligent made her time with him much more enjoyable and intriguing. Without warning, her eyes caught sight of a men's suit displayed on a mannequin. Curiosity piqued, she turned to the girl beside her and inquired about her opinion. Would this suit be a good fit for her son? The girl cast a nonchalant glance at the outfit and casually remarked that it seemed all right. Without warning, the woman mentioned that something extraordinary was necessary because Prosecutor Park had a blind date scheduled for that day. Hearing this, the girl was taken aback and momentarily stood still. His mother carried on about which suit might be the most fitting for him. She also remarked that, despite the date being set up by his father, Park had consistently been a dutiful son. Was taken aback by the unexpected surge of jealousy that washed over her. It was hard to believe, considering they had been sitting side by side in that very car just the day before. On this day, he intended to present himself as a dignified gentleman in the presence of another woman. She attempted to regain her composure, contemplating that this might be her opportunity to break free from him and grasp her freedom. However, uncertainty lingered in her mind about whether this was genuinely her desire. The woman and the girl soon reached the precinct with the intention of meeting Park. His mother presented him with a new shirt, expressing with a cheerful tone that it would enhance his good looks on his upcoming date. She further mentioned that Tay had assisted in selecting it, bringing her fresh and youthful insight to the choice. The man cast a quick look at the girl from behind his mother's shoulder. Her expression remained neutral, yet she offered him well wishes, hoping that all would proceed smoothly for him. A vein throbbed visibly on the prosecutor's temple, as his anger surged uncontrollably in response to her words. At the same time, his mother beamed with a radiant smile, while the girl merely cast a fleeting look in his direction. He remained still, observing the women as they exited the precinct. The anger surged through him as he struggled to comprehend Tay's audacity in addressing him with such boldness. It seemed incomprehensible to him, especially considering the tumultuous history they shared. In his mind, he questioned who she believed he was to warrant such a brazen approach. That evening, the prosecutor sat in anticipation at one of the city's prestigious restaurants, eagerly awaiting his blind date. Upon opening the door, the man noticed a young woman seated at the table, intently examining the menu. Without raising her eyes, she remarked on his tardiness. The man walked up to the table, which was arranged with care, and acknowledged that he was running behind schedule. The girl, lowering her menu, pointed out that he was an hour late, her gaze sharp and direct. Despite her pointed remark, he appeared unfazed. The girl identified herself by the name and acknowledged her knowledge of his involvement in an important case. She proceeded to give him her business card. The young woman was the daughter of the influential owner of a prominent law firm, where she also held a position. Park chose not to accept the business card offered to him. Instead, he mentioned that he was familiar with her reputation and inquired if she found working at her father's company to be challenging. Ha acknowledged the challenges she was facing, yet chose not to delve into work-related topics. Instead, she expressed her fondness for reading books and watching movies. Curiosity piqued, she inquired about the prosecutor's own interests. The young woman graced him with a charming smile, prompting the man to express his preference for engaging in physical activities. Upon realizing his intention, the girl let out a small cough and noted that his hobby was rather peculiar. The man, feeling a wave of boredom wash over him, repeatedly checked his watch. He found himself lacking any desire to keep the conversation going with her. Unexpectedly, the girl remarked that how he chose to entertain himself was his own concern and that it didn't matter to her. However, she mentioned this was only acceptable until their wedding. She further stated that after they were married, he would need to conduct himself appropriately. The man stared at her with a puzzled expression, seemingly unable to grasp the meaning behind her words, and inquired about her intentions. She became upset and emphasized the significance of showing respect to one's future partner. Leaned forward with a playful smirk, remarking that her words made it sound as if he were already down on one knee, proposing to her. With a laugh, he then inquired whether she would approach him the next day, claiming to be pregnant with his child. The young woman's dissatisfaction was evident, and she warned him to not overstep boundaries. She reminded him that both of them understood the reason for their meeting that day, and regardless of their feelings, they would fulfill their obligations. The prosecutor rose to his feet, casting a threatening glare in her direction. He accused her of being the one who first overstepped boundaries by making demands of him. With an icy gaze fixed on her, he challenged her to dare repeat such words to him. He rose to his feet, flung the doors open with a dramatic flourish, and expressed his desire to never cross paths with them again. As walked away, he cast a furious glance in his direction, yet she remained silent. The prosecutor's house stood shrouded in darkness, the lateness of the hour evident. In the living room, Tai perched anxiously on the couch, her teeth nibbling at her nails. Her thoughts raced with the hope that the evening's date was progressing smoothly, evidenced by the man's continued absence from home. After dinner, she speculated that they might have chosen to share the evening. Unexpectedly, the thought stirred a sense of jealousy within her. The girl recalled the times he had spent with her, and pondered whether he would show that same kindness to the other woman. At last, she concluded it was time to retire for the night. But in that very moment, the unexpected creak of the door swinging open reached her ears. She rushed to the staircase, eager to reach her room swiftly, yet found the man unexpectedly close on her heels. It was obvious to everyone that he was not acting like his usual self, and the strong scent of alcohol confirmed he had consumed a considerable amount. With unsteady movements, he extended his hand toward her, desperately begging her to stay by his side. The girl responded plainly, mentioning that his return had been much later than expected. The strong scent of alcohol clung to him, and his clothes were thoroughly drenched. She was puzzled by his condition, especially since there hadn't been any rain outside. As she prepared to depart, convinced that fatigue must have overtaken him, his quiet voice reached her ears. He questioned her intention to simply walk away and implored her to approach him. Observed that he was having a hard time remaining upright. Although worry tugged at her, she attempted to persuade him to take a break and rest. Unexpectedly, she noticed tears cascading down his cheeks as he continuously murmured the word please, imploring her to join him. Facing one another, the man admitted his purpose in coming was to reveal that things had not unfolded according to her wishes. The girl gazed at him with a puzzled expression, unable to grasp the meaning behind his words. He let out a deep sigh, recalling how she had wished him luck on the date earlier and had even helped him choose his clothes. With an apologetic tone, he expressed his regret for letting her down, admitting that the date had not turned out as planned. The girl reassured him that there was no need for him to apologize or justify his actions to her. She suggested that perhaps, in the future, he would encounter the right person. She concluded by mentioning that if this was the sole topic he wanted to discuss, it was now her time to retire for the night. Unexpectedly, Park embraced her from behind, drawing her near as he gently urged her not to go. She sighed audibly as his lips brushed against her neck. On the second floor, they positioned themselves before a vast panoramic window, where the moonlight gently streamed through. Upon returning home after work, the man realized he had been eagerly searching for her, yearning to spend some time together. Unable to locate her, he was left with no option but to proceed with the date he had planned. In that instant, the chill encasing the girl's heart started to melt just a little. Though she had only heard rumors of his search for her, she couldn't grasp why it stirred her so deeply. As their fingers laced together, faint wisps of breath left subtle marks on the fogged-up window. Before long, the man gently turned the girl to face him, desperation in his eyes. He implored her to confess that she never truly wished for him to be with someone else. He urged her to acknowledge that she had been dishonest in the past and inquired if he might kiss her once more, just as he had done the previous day. At that moment, Tae-rai experienced an unfamiliar sensation. The sound of his pleading words brought a soothing comfort to her, while his messy and intoxicated look oddly drew her in. Despite feeling pathetic, she couldn't deceive herself about her emotions. Tai faced the mirror, a wave of nervousness washing over her. Doubt crept into her mind as she questioned the suitability of her attire, prompting her to adjust it one more time in hopes that it would appear perfect. She began to ponder whether she should secure her hair in a tie or allow it to hang freely. Noticing the mark on her neck, she felt a surge of anger. It seemed unfair that this would occur on such a crucial day for her. Recollections of Park's appearance from the previous day surged through her thoughts, accompanied by his warning to speak softly if she wished to keep their conversation private from the rest of the household. He embraced the girl with a firm grip, gently reminding her of the crucial meeting scheduled for the following day. He assured her that if she made an effort, he would do everything possible to ensure a successful outcome with her father. Now she found herself standing in front of the mirror, assuring herself repeatedly that she bore no fault. Park was simply someone assisting her father. Continuously, she reminded herself of the importance of feeling thankful towards him. In the prosecutor's office, the girl's father sat in disbelief, his eyes fixed on the table before him. Despite the prosecutor's encouragement to eat without delay, the man remained bewildered, unable to comprehend why he was being treated with such generosity. The man felt a wave of embarrassment washing over him as he expressed his disbelief at the prosecutor's unexpected attentiveness and kindness. He wondered aloud whether this was merely a spontaneous gesture of goodwill from a stranger. Park gazed at the man with a face devoid of any expression. He went on to express that his past experiences with various individuals had caused him considerable pain, and he was reluctant to endure further disappointment by clinging to unrealistic expectations. The prosecutor wore a smirk as he encouraged the man to halt and take in his surroundings. He questioned whether the man was aware of his current location. He gestured towards the table laden with food, prompting the other to consider whether it all appeared to be a mirage of hope. Tightly clenched his fists, his voice filled with desperation as he questioned whether the prosecutor truly intended to offer him assistance. The man extended the chopsticks to him without hesitation, instructing him to eat, explaining that all the food had been meticulously prepared just for him at the behest of an individual. Shocked, he accepted the chopsticks, and with a stammer, inquired about who might have orchestrated such an elaborate gesture. Park mentioned in a straightforward manner that the person in question had already arrived. Just then, stepped into the room and halted in her tracks upon catching sight of her father. The young girl was mesmerized by the sight of her father, whom she hadn't laid eyes on in over 2 years. As the man rose unsteadily to his feet, disbelief clouded his expression. He questioned whether the young woman standing before him could truly be his daughter, finding it hard to accept the possibility. The reunited family remained blissfully unaware of the cold, piercing gaze that the prosecutor directed towards them. Sang embraced his daughter closely, his eyes welling with tears as he pleaded for her forgiveness, acknowledging the struggles she and her mother had faced. The man felt a heavy burden of guilt, believing he had failed in safeguarding his family. The girl gazed at her father, gently holding his hand to her cheek, and expressed with certainty that his love for her was unmatched by anyone else. The father enveloped his daughter in a warm embrace, whispering a heartfelt promise that a day would come when he would be free from prison. He assured her that once that day arrived, all their hardships would be left in the past, and he pledged to care for them wholeheartedly. Park kept a keen eye on them, his attention unwavering. It was then that he noticed the situation was so endearing that it began to grate on his nerves. A persistent worry hovered over him, imagining a future where the girl might genuinely go back to her father's care, a realm beyond his grasp. The man drummed his fingers anxiously, pondering if assisting her father was worth the effort in this situation. Tae was on the verge of departing for the meeting when she caught sight of the prosecutor, arriving to see her from the corner of her eye. Upon entering the room, halted, his eyes meticulously examining her from head to toe in silence. The girl mentioned, somewhat unnecessarily, that he wasn't at work today, despite it being obvious because it was the weekend. The man kept his gaze on her, his expression remaining completely neutral. Tae realized that his arrival at her doorstep was not a mere coincidence. He always had a purpose behind his actions. She glanced at him, contemplating that he might be expecting further appreciation for his assistance to her and her father. She expressed her genuine gratitude to him, conveying how truly thankful she felt for his help. The man remained silent, offering only a smile as he tilted his head and inquired about her destination. The girl felt a wave of tension wash over her, dreading the possibility of another argument with him. She explained her intention to meet up with a friend, citing her already made plans. Without warning, Park tugged her closer by the strap of her bag. Her heart raced frantically as she prepared for another clash, anticipating his usual tactics of manipulation or demands. To her astonishment, the man embraced her warmly and, with a chuckle, inquired about the reason behind her fear. He wondered aloud if he had ever prohibited her from doing anything. Tae's cheeks flushed with color as a wave of confusion washed over her in response to his amiable demeanor. At the same time, the man discreetly placed his credit card into her purse. Before the girl had a chance to inquire about the significance of it all, he flashed a smile and suggested that she should enjoy a tasty meal with her friend. She accepted the card briefly before giving it back to him, explaining that she didn't require it since she had her own money. She accepted the card briefly before returning it to him, explaining that she had no need for it as she possessed her own money. His cheeks turned a shade of pink as she assured her friend that she indeed had sufficient funds to enjoy dinner together. Without any warning, Park encircled her waist with his arm, drawing her nearer as he inclined his face towards hers. He expressed his unwavering belief in her ability to handle things on her own. The girl remained engulfed in embarrassment. However, she noticed an absence of the usual sense of danger that he typically exuded. Instead, his demeanor was unexpectedly gentle and serene. Her hands rested against his broad chest, and the intensity of his gaze quickened her heartbeat. After a brief pause, a smile spread across the man's face as he expressed his simple desire to take care of her. A man hovered mere centimeters from her face, patiently biding his time. The girl distanced herself from him, expressing that his actions would cause her tardiness. She mentioned it was time for her to depart. To her astonishment, merely offered a gentle smile, lifted his shoulders in a casual shrug, and expressed his hope that she would enjoy herself. As he departed, he proposed the idea of them sharing a meal on another occasion. Without warning, he stopped in his tracks, pivoted to face her, and offered that she could hold onto the card for future use at her discretion. He comforted her by explaining that the card had no restrictions. The girl stood motionless, clutching the black card tightly. She questioned whether her mind was deceiving her with a cruel illusion, as the man's demeanor was markedly different today. In a dimly lit bar, found herself seated beside Lee Jun, the two of them quietly enjoying their beers. It had been quite some time since she had last experienced such a moment. The man expressed his concern for her well-being, mentioning that he had been anxious due to their prolonged absence from each other's lives. The girl felt her cheeks warm as she insisted that everything was all right, despite the whirlwind of events unfolding in her life at the moment. She then turned the conversation towards him, inquiring about how things were progressing on his end. Without warning, her friend became visibly tense, confessing that he had secretly been concerned about her for quite a while. He inquired whether the man who had arrived to pick her up was truly a prosecutor. The man recalled how, during their previous encounter, an unusual tension had lingered in the air between them. He inquired whether she might have, perhaps, taken a loan from him or something similar. Terry listened attentively to his words, finding them somewhat amusing. A smile spread across her face as she assured him that his assumption was entirely off the mark. The man gazed at her with a worried expression, recalling how apprehensive he had been on the day he had brought her to his home. In truth, despite her words identifying him as the prosecutor responsible for her father's case, the girl appeared utterly petrified. Lee Jun observed her intently, expressing that she could trust him with the truth. He encouraged her to share her thoughts about what kind of person he was and if he had caused her any pain. The girl swiftly set her glass down on the bar counter. her expression turning into a frown as the man went on to assure her that he could handle any situation that might arise. Upon hearing the familiar words, she felt her body tense with frustration. Anger simmered beneath the surface as her fists clenched tightly. In a voice tinged with irritation, she reminded herself that she had already assured him of her well-being. The girl sat in the back of a taxi on her way home, reflecting on the day's events and wondering if she had been too quick to judge Lee Jun's curiosity about her life. She informed him that Park was, in fact, the prosecutor responsible for her father's case, and urged the man to avoid any complications. Out of nowhere, her train of thought was broken by the ding of a text message. It came from Lee Jun, who expressed his regret over his actions and wished that she wasn't angry with him. Let out a heavy sigh, her mind tangled in a web of emotions she couldn't quite unravel. The prosecutor was someone who typically grated on her nerves, yet in his absence, her thoughts were relentlessly drawn to him. Whenever they crossed paths, he managed to dampen her spirits. Yet, despite this, she felt an inexplicable urge to engage in more meaningful talks with him, eager to discover his true nature and personality. She remained uncertain about her actual emotions towards him.